Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to welcome back after the holiday break, Madam Mineur, and I'm sorry, and on this occasion there won't be a diatribe, there'll just be a little bit of forensic analysis, but I do have some questions. Re-Australia, I have two direct questions to the Commission. Re-Australia, was the free movement of people between Australia and the EU ever discussed? Was it something that was ever raised? Is there a proposed free movement of people clause between the EU and Australia? I think the EU would be very sensible to do that. But on the other hand, they seem to be getting access to the markets without a free movement clause. I also have another question for you. Is there a suggestion, was there ever a proposal in the negotiations that Australia should pay for access to the EU market? Because that seems to be what the UK, that seems to be what is being required of the UK. And why is the Commission so prejudiced against the UK? I mean, they're demanding us that we pay, I think it's 40 billion, I can't remember if it's euros or sterling, but it's a great deal, paying for access. It's not seen to be expected of Australia. And I also have another question as well. The report of the first round of negotiations, I haven't been able to find much of a reference to what the negotiations are, and indeed what the proposals are on agricultural goods, which is always a very thorny and controversial segment and element in trade agreements. There's something about energy and raw materials. I suppose raw materials could be classified as being agricultural. What is the position on that? Now, I will say that the text, the European Parliament text, does mention agricultural goods under in section 19, subsection J. But could we perhaps have a little more? Well, could we actually just have some basic facts because they aren't there? Finally, I don't know what the appetite is to have any history, but the fact of the matter is, and this is relevant to my country, is that when we definitively and finally joined the EU in 1975, by which date transition agreements had expired, we actually had a trade agreement with Australia, which we turned our back on. We tore it up. And one of the rationalisations, which you constantly hear, you hear it even today, for being part of the EU, is that it's so much easier it's so much easier, you're so much more likely to be able to negotiate trade agreements. So here we are, 40 years later, still talking about it. But could I also ask you to answer my direct questions? I would really appreciate it, especially on agriculture.
On free movement, no, there is no clauses on free movement as such. We do have the Mode 4, of course, part of the trade in services and investments, where text normally is proposed. But that is more when it comes to movement of business people or movement of staff in relation to investments, but again, not as regards free movement in general for people. On agriculture goods, I'm not sure exactly what was meant with that question. I presume what you are looking for are more things that pertain to the market access when we do the offer itself, more than what is in the text. And as I said, we will come to that when we have the first exchange of offers. On energy and raw materials, also, of course, an extremely important aspect with Australia. And again, this is one of our newer chapters we have in negotiations. Sometimes provisions, sometimes chapters, but obviously it's important there because Australia is a very important raw material provider, and there are a lot of similarities and a lot of joint views to keep markets open. But as I said, we've just basically started on these discussions, so we'll see what kind of result we have on those aspects.